So, welcome to one in a series of webinars, Protect and Govern Your Office 365 platform. You may be interested in previous sessions we've ran, for example, controlling Azure costs, deep dive into managing access into Microsoft Teams, transform GDPR policy into business as usual compliance, resume your business after an outage or attack. And please check out our events page on our website for more details. So, journey to the cloud. We spend time with our customers and we usually start with trying to understand their plans and where they are on their road to success and their deployment and use of Office 365 and Azure cloud services. So we usually start with this slide. Oh, someone might need to go on mute. However, when getting ready for this webinar, understanding what a roadmap actually meant slightly threw me. So I looked it up, and the definition according to the internet is, a roadmap is a strategic plan that defines a goal or desired outcome that includes the major steps or milestones needed to reach it. It also serves as a communication tool, a high-level document that helps articulate strategic thinking, the why, behind both the goal and the plan for getting there. This put the slide into perspective for me, actually. Too many plans are tactical from what we've seen. IT may have a vision on what they are doing, but is it connected to the other business divisions, sales, HR, compliance, etc.? We have seen CISOs only recently become much more involved in what they require from productivity and cloud-based tools like Office 365. But we still go to meetings whereby sensitive customer and employee data is going to be leaving a company's environment or firewall, and yet the compliance team are not in the meeting. So when we discuss this roadmap with clients, the idea is that you can visualize the steps you need to make and who within your business should be engaged. How you use a managed compliance center, for example, and Exchange Online, SharePoint, or Teams, will give you an idea of who else should be part of your roadmap. Today, we're going to focus on particular areas that we see continually throw up roadblocks to your journey. With me, I've got Karthik Padmanabhan, who'll do the bulk of the webinar today. Karthik has over 22 years of experience in the IT industry, with over 15 years consulting on Microsoft technologies, focused on SharePoint, Microsoft 365, and its associated ecosystem. He's previously led high-performing consultancy teams across the UK and Europe for one of the largest global IT services companies. Most recently, he worked at the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, where he was the architect and system owner for M365. Here, he developed their vision and roadmap, working closely with the compliance and operations teams to ensure strict regulatory and information governance requirements were met, not only for internal processes and content, but also for applications and content shared with external counterparties on the platform. And Viam Mercer, Viam's our practice head for Azure. He'll manage any questions you may have for Karthik during this webinar, so please use the Q&A button on the screen. And myself, John Ford, sales director here at BlueSource, probably too many years experience, but I've also spent time at Microsoft running retail and distribution accounts there, and more recently at security vendor Symantec before it split into Veritas, where I managed large banking clients focused on data management solutions. So today, we're going to cover some of those problems that will impact your roadmap to success, and basically in particular, those concerns around where data is stored and finding it, controlling its share outside of your corporate environment, how to protect all of these new locations where people are now located, whilst delivering automation to take away the manual processes involved in the more traditional use of IT. We'll also show and demo Compliance Center and how that can support your journey towards better information protection and governance. And finally, for those of you who did not stay up half of last week, we have some interesting updates from Microsoft Inspire. So Karthik, I will now pass over to yourself.
Thank you so much, John. So we live in a time where digital technology and remote everything is profoundly impacting our lives unlike ever before. From the way we connect with each other, to how we collaborate with colleagues, and to how businesses are run. This has led to many organizations needing to accelerate digital transformation initiatives to support the new normal, but there are massive effects and concerns. Some of these are organizations may find themselves responsible for protecting crisscrossing web of technologies they may not own. The number of locations where data is stored has multiplied because they've suddenly had to scale out to various SaaS services to deliver their products and services. This leads to compliance and governance concerns. Where is sensitive data stored? Is my data being appropriately protected, retained, and disposed? The number and types of devices that data gets consumed and shared is more varied than ever before. We've got mobile devices, tablets, personal devices, wearables, and now with remote everywhere, it's home routers, all kinds of networking equipment. Taken together, all these concerns and trends represent a shared challenge to protecting and governing your data. Fortunately, there is a way forward through secure productivity on Microsoft 365. So let's take a look at how BlueSource can help. BlueSource's answer to this is a 5-step program to deliver a secure and compliant Microsoft 365 platform. We'll go into each of these areas in more detail, but at a high level, step 1 will be to assess your apps and data. This will help us identify where your data resides, how it's being shared, and what apps are actually being used. Step 2 is to secure your identities. Here we'll focus on Active Directory hardening, authentication methods, cloud app access, baseline policies to secure your tenant. Then, classify your data. Developing your information governance classification is a cornerstone activity. Everything we do hinges off this. The actual governance policies, DLP policies, all cascade from here, so it's very important. This activity cannot be an IT-only initiative. Automating your processes. I'm not sure I can stress this one enough. Automating the application of labels drives compliance and eliminates human error. Finally, engage your users. Onboarding a new toolset, training has always been important. That's not just what I mean here. I mean really engaging them from the start of the project through information management campaigns, ongoing security and governance awareness training, and identifying feature and data champions. So let's look into these in a bit more detail. So step 1, this first step involves understanding what apps are being used across the organization today and how prolific their use is, what data the apps are using, by whom, where's the data being shared, how much data is being transferred between apps. This will help us identify potential shadow IT issues if users are putting data onto non-sanctioned SaaS applications, for instance. It will also help us evaluate the dark data in your organization. Industry estimates put this at about 80% for the average business, and even going up to 90% in some cases. Identifying and then responsibly disposing of this unnecessary data can save organizations vast amounts of governance oversight, storage needs, and costs. This next step is to secure your identities and the platform. The way we do this is through several integrated techniques. First and foremost, does your Microsoft 365 tenant and security practices conform to the current NCSE cloud security guidelines? there are 14 principles that are addressed, which, if implemented, will deliver a great security posture. Now, the guidelines and principles detailed aren't specific to Microsoft 365, but we can help translate those principles to the toolsets and protection configurations for your Microsoft 365 tenant. Then there are workload-specific configurations that need to be set depending on which services you are using or plan to leverage. These can range from application-specific security policies, messaging policies, polling policies, meeting policies, and app access policies. Next, we move on to some of the less obvious ways of protecting your identities. Roughly 90% of organizations use Active Directory as their identity and authentication service. And AD has an open API by design. So if you've got access to a compromised identity, there are many tools readily available built into every PC that can be used to potentially attack AD. With this, you can move laterally and possibly gain access to a privileged account. You may well have seen some of the stats around attackers typically going undetected within a network for upwards of 200 days. And unfortunately, social engineering your way onto a user's machine can be scarily easy to do. The majority of traditional security tools are just not designed to detect or contain these types of attacks. The good news is that Microsoft 365, specifically the E5 SKU, does include advanced threat protection capabilities that can help, from identity protection on Azure AD to advanced AI machine learning based protection in Microsoft 365. These tools, in coordination, can identify malicious behavior patterns, initiate remediation actions, kill the attack chain automatically before any serious damage is caused to your business. We'll have a look at an example of this later on in the webinar. Step 3. Classification has huge benefits for the organization, both from a security as well as compliance stance. We'll also look at these in the demo. But where do we start? Well, if you don't already have one, then the starting point will be to define an information governance model. We can help engage with your compliance teams, data protection teams, and information security teams, maybe legal as well. At a very high level, what we're trying to identify here is what your label taxonomy is going to look like, what your retention schedule should be. Do you require disposition reviews for your content? What kinds of sensitive information should you be identifying? What are the information protection policies needed? Here I'm referring to DLP policies, for instance, or restricting access to certain files or encrypted content. We'll take all of this information and work with you to build your information governance strategy and then implement it into a working solution. Finally, while we're talking about data governance, we mustn't forget backups. Microsoft 365 doesn't include data backups. As a service, it isn't designed for data recoverability, but rather for service resilience. So if it came down to it, it will sacrifice data for service continuity. So bear that in mind when defining and documenting your BCP. Feel free to reach out to us for more information on managed backups if you need to. Like I said earlier, I cannot stress how important this is. When you're able to automate things like the application of labels, it helps ensure compliance. For example, if you take the lifecycle of a document, an author might initially create a document that may be classified as general, but over time, the document may go through several iterations, and maybe some months later, a colleague adds some sensitive information into that document. Document's label should now be changed. but the user who edited the document may not realize that, thus now potentially exposing the company to data exfiltration risks of that sensitive content. We can enforce the automation based on a range of triggers. These can include sensitive content, which I will demonstrate later, based on an event, such as change in a metadata value, which is termination of a contract or the creation date of the document, based on keywords, even based on trainable classifiers. That's creating your own machine learning model to define your own custom content type, sensitivity type. You may want to classify all invoices you receive, and through the Compliance Center, you can point the machine learning engine to a SharePoint repository, which has a few hundred example invoices, based on which it will create a model to automatically identify and classify future invoices that you add to the system. You can then further automate business processes based on that label. Finally, there are other benefits to classifying your data appropriately, and that discovery becomes much easier. So when we are building out key discovery cases using the data investigation tools within Microsoft 365, by classifying and labeling data, we can scope the search to just the labels we need, which means we get results much faster and more refined, which in turn means our compliance and legal teams are not wasting time sorting through huge data sets and can focus on more important tasks that require their specialized skills. There are a whole raft of tools within the platform to assist with information protection and governance, from label analytics to show us where labels are being applied across the organization, through to e-discovery and data investigation capabilities, which allow us to enforce litigation holes on data, moving that data into evidence lockers, and reviewing and redacting data within the locker. The final, and arguably one of the most important steps to delivering a secure and governed productivity platform is to engage your users. This has to be from the start when we're planning the user adoption strategy. We need to build a robust awareness campaign to ensure people understand not only the new ways of working are coming, but what's in it for them and why should they care about it. A few years ago, I was speaking to a compliance team at a bank, so it's highly regulated. They worked across the world and had regulatory requirements for many geos. The compliance team had well-documented processes and requirements, one of which included having a classification label on all documents. This was linked to other processes for regulatory compliance as well as DLP. Some of the aspects such as DLP were automated, but most were paper-driven processes. I spoke to a person who worked on one of the business teams, far removed from compliance. This person had worked for the company for 12 years in the same role, so very proficient at her job. She was about to send out some confidential information to a counterparty. There's nothing wrong with that, but I noticed the classification information wasn't on the document. So I asked her why it wasn't, and her response was, "Oh, I saw that on the new template, but I don't understand what it's for. It makes my document look messy as it's not relevant to the counterparty, so I just delete it before sending the file." Now, since the rollout of these new compliance processes wasn't effectively communicated to all users, she didn't see the value of it for her. All she saw was unnecessary information cluttering the work she'd been doing for over a decade. But by doing that, she was actually putting the organization at risk of breaching their regulatory compliance requirements. Let's take a look at some of these information protection capabilities in the Microsoft 365 platform. We are creating and consuming data across a number of different devices and services. Markets and countries are increasingly enacting new laws and creating new oversight agencies. This is especially pertinent for geographically dispersed organizations and the number of regulatory changes they must contend with. And finally, the protection and governance of sensitive data is one of the biggest concerns for organizations. So just a few questions to bear in mind as we get into the demo. The first one is, where is my sensitive data located? What are the risky activities happening in my organization, such as files shared externally or across first or third-party apps? And I need to comply with new regulations. Where is my PII data located? Where is it being generated? Right. So I'm just going to switch demo. Okay, so what we see here is the Compliance Center. And I'll give you a quick overview of it. So right at the top, we have information such as your compliance score. This is your score compared within your geographic location and within your industry sector. So it's comparison with your peers. And it gives you a percentage ranking of how you're doing. Get information from Cloud App Compliance, so we can see how all of your other systems are doing. We get information from your actual usage on the system. So in this case, it's the retention labels that we're showing here. We get information on who files are shared with, all the high-risk applications that the system has identified. We also get information from DRP matches, shared files, to what files are publicly available, and you can take action on those if you need to. And finally, there's a section on alerts, so activities that are coming through. Now, there isn't a lot of activity on my demo tenant here, so it looks a little bit blank. Now, if we move into some of these sections, so I want to start by showing you the information protection area. And looking at the information protection, since this loads up, we can see a range of labels that have been defined here. And these labels are the sensitivity labels, or the classifications that we're actually going to use in the documents. And this flows across all of the platforms within Microsoft 365, or all of the workloads. So if I was to show you, so what I'll do now is just switch to SharePoint, for instance. So here I am on a SharePoint site. And what I can do is go ahead and create a new Word document. First thing you'll notice as soon as it loads up is that I actually have a sensitivity option built right into the client. So there's no plugins, there's no need for any third-party products or apps here. And when I click on the drop down, we see that I have all of the sensitivity labels exactly as we saw it in the Compliance Center. So this is now flowed across. So I get all of those labels. I can also create sub-labels that I can use to classify my content. Now, one of the things we talked about earlier was if I start putting information into this document, it's all good that I can manually select these labels, but the real power comes in when it can automatically do this for me. So let's have a look here. So if I was to put in some information, and I will put in some sensitive content. So in this case, I'm putting a social security number into this document. And I've set up a policy that says if it detects this sensitive content, then I want it to automatically do several things to this document. I want it to encrypt the document. I want it to add some headers and footers, and you'll notice that at the moment, there isn't anything in this document. You'll also notice that it's classified as personal and the document is open for editing. So this typically takes a few minutes to sort of scan through the document and to do that. But in order to speed up the process, I'm just going to close it for a second and open it again. What you'll also notice is there's a new document created, obviously in SharePoint, and it's also showing me the sensitive information type. So if I was to open that up, let's just force it to scan it a little bit more. And you'll notice immediately the policy tab has come up. So it's scanned the content, it's automatically classified it, it's telling me my organization has automatically applied this highly confidential label along with the sub-label, Project Falcon. So all of the policies that I've defined for that sensitive type are now applied. You'll also notice down at the bottom here, it's encrypted the documents. It's actually locked now. So it's done several things. Now, if I was to look at the headers and footers, you'll notice that that's been auto-populated as well now. So it's put in all the information from the label in both of those areas. So let me close this and I'll show you on SharePoint that's changed as well now. So the sensitivity is now showing me that it's a highly confidential document. And I can actually flow policies now right into SharePoint as well. So from that label, based on the fact that it's highly confidential, I can now apply SharePoint. So I can lock this document down, for instance, if I wanted to restrict access based on the fact that it's now highly confidential. So I can do all of those additional things. If I show you a similar thing in OneDrive, just to show you the same thing works across OneDrive as well. So in OneDrive, create a new document. And open it in Word. It starts off with my default sensitivity, which I've labeled, which I've specified, which is personal. And if I put the same kind of sensitive information in here, again, it will scan it and do it for me and automate that whole process. And as I said, I will just try and speed it up by forcing it to do a refresh and to read that content for me. All right. So sometimes it can take a few seconds. All right, let's come back to that one and see if that's worked. The next thing I want to show you, oh, okay, I think it has worked now. The next thing I want to show you is in your email. So the same policy that I applied will work across all of the different workloads. So we've looked at SharePoint, we've looked at OneDrive. Hopefully that will happen soon on OneDrive as well. If I go into, oh yes, it has. Okay, so we see on OneDrive as well, it's worked. It's applied that highly confidential label, so that's great. So all of that works across. And I'll go to my email, and if I was to create a new email, now obviously since that document has been encrypted, I know that I can't do anything with that document. If I was to try and send that document out, well, it's an encrypted document, so no one will be able to open it. But what I can do is, what if I was trying to be clever and to say that I wanted to extract the information from that document, put it straight into the email. Well, let's see how the system responds to that. So what I'll do is choose an external, in this case, Bob, who's outside my organization. So as soon as I put Bob's name in here, we see a tip coming up saying that person is external. So there's restrictions that apply. No secret information that I'm going to share here, and try and put that same sensitive information that I've extracted directly from that document and put it into my email. Let's see. So one of the other things you'll notice is that sensitivity information is now available here as well. So I could manually, of course, choose it in my email. But again, what we're trying to do is make sure that we automate as much of this as possible, so there isn't the chance that somebody forgets to do that. And we see that that's popped up within a few seconds. So here we go. So first of all, this is an external person that we're trying to send to. It also tells me your organization has applied that confidentiality label, so the Project Falcon. We also see that this recipient is outside the organization, so this conflicts. So this email, so the sending of this information, the sensitive information, conflicts with the organization policy, so I can't do that, and it's blocked it for me. So it's all completely secure. But there are scenarios where maybe sending this information to Bob is actually something that should be allowed. And what you don't want is to have additional overheads with your IT team and kind of interfering with people doing their jobs. So you have the ability within the policies to define that. So in this case, I can go and say, show me the details. And this shows me all of that information, and it tells me what I can do to avoid this issue. So one is, of course, I can remove the recipient because the policy says I can't send this sensitive information outside the organization, but that's not what I want. I want to send it to this person. But the other thing I can do is actually override that. And here in the policy, I specified that I need to have a business justification in order to override that. So how do we set these things? So if I go back into the information center and I showed you the information protection, and here's where we've got our data loss policies, data loss prevention policies. And I can link this to the types of information that I want to protect. In this case, I'm protecting your PII data, which includes that social security number. So I can go ahead and actually look at the details of that policy. Okay. Take a few seconds. And we can see that I want that policy to apply to all of these different products. So it's across the range of the typical workloads that you use. So Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, etc. These are where I configure all of those different rules that I want. So in this case, we can see that I actually want to be able to override that information. So I've enabled that now necessarily, or I'm enforcing that I need a business justification. And this gets tagged. So the information that I put in here gets logged, it gets sent off to your security team, your compliance team that's reviewing this. So if you had overridden that and sent it off and it was wrong to do so, that would be flagged with the compliance team and they can then take action. And finally, I'll show you that it works across teams as well. So in this case, I'll pick this particular channel. I'm going to start a new conversation here, and I will put this information, the sensitive information, in here and post it to the channel. Now you'll notice that this has gone through fine. No action has been taken. And that's because you'll notice that this team has only internal participants. So this is in compliance with the policy that I've set. The policy that I've set is that it should block this sensitive information from leaving my organization. So that's fine. If I go to this other channel, you notice in this channel I actually have a guest user. So I have an external user. And so if I post sensitive information in this channel, potentially that could be leaving the organization. So if I post the same information, so the same sensitive information, you will notice that very soon, and fingers crossed, oh yes, good. So you'll notice that it's blocked that message because that is in violation of my policy. So we see that just defining the policy in one place is now enforcing it across Microsoft 365. Okay, so let me just switch back. All right. So because I can't show you what that looks like on a mobile phone, I've taken a few screenshots here, and so I'm just showing here that same sensitive information. So those same classifications are available within the mobile phone apps as well. So you see exactly all of the things that are defined. You also see that it works in the content across the mobile app. So you're protected across all of the tools that you would typically use to connect with Microsoft 365. What we also have here is some information to show you how it protects. So you can get a summary of all the activity that's happening across through the Compliance Center. So here it's showing me all of the actions that are taking place. So for instance, if somebody has copied some content to a USB drive, for instance, and then maybe uploaded it to a third-party app, to a third-party cloud app, all of those interactions are actually tracked within the Compliance Center, and you can take actions on those based on the label. So I could, for instance, say, actually, I want to prevent things from being copied across. I want to block information from being added to a third-party cloud service, for instance, and you can do that. This is how you would define things on those third-party services. So as an example here, this is with bots. So here's how we can use that same classification label, and then we can enforce policies. So the next part is looking at our external threats. So the difference between a few years ago, or even a few months ago, in the case of some organizations, is that we no longer have the luxury of drawing a security perimeter just around our organization. Because we're now using mobile devices, we have our employees working remote, working from home, basically working from anywhere and everywhere. And the number of threats and the attack surface has also exponentially increased as we're adopting cloud services that are available and accessible on the open internet. So things like phishing and ransomware, social engineering. We have all these threats to contend with, these increased threats to contend with. Here's where the advanced threat protection tools on Microsoft 365 come into effect. So let's have a quick look at how some of these work. All of the advanced threat protection tools are powered by the Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph. This is an AI-driven and machine learning-based set of tools that Microsoft has. And as we saw earlier, so 90% of Fortune 500 companies are using Active Directory. 90% of them are using Microsoft 365 and they are all sending signals to the Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph. Have approximately 8.2 trillion signals received every day. So the AI engine is using this information, constantly learning and evolving based on that data to protect and share that information across the platform. So let's take a quick look at how this actually works. So here we are in the Security Center, and we start off by looking at what new alerts we've received. And we see that we've got a high priority alert here. There's a weaponized URL and an email that's been detected by threat management. We see the status has been resolved. But if we want to have a look at exactly what happened here, click on it, start to get more information on what happened. So we look at the resolution, and what this helps us do is actually launches the investigation graph that the ATP has used here. So the investigation was triggered. We received a weaponized URL in the email. We can look at the full trail of exactly what happened. We see that there were 53 emails investigated. There were 6 inter-organization phishing emails that were sent on that, based on those 53 emails that were investigated. One of those users seems to have been impacted, and we've identified additional activities based on that user. We also see that there's compromised device, and we see a number of threats have been found. So first of all, there were these phishing emails sent internally. There were user activity anomalies detected, so that's with that user. There's compromised device with the malware here. We want to look into these a bit more. We can drill into the specific alerts. So we see those 3 things called out. If we start with the emails, for instance, we can click into that and we can see exactly what emails were received and what these phishing emails were. So there were 6 of those phishing emails sent out. We have all of the details here, so we can see that they were all sent by the same user, or at least that user's account, and they were sent to other people within the organization. We can then drill further into the users who were impacted, in this case, a user called Jeff, and we can see all of the risky activities that the system has pulled for us. And we can look at the details of the log information, so all of the log data. But if we want to look a bit more, so we've seen that a lot of actions were taken to remediate this issue. But one of the actions missing was anything to do with the machine. So we can see that of all of the activities that took place, so the URL was blocked, the emails were deleted, this impacted user's password was reset, and MFA was enforced for this user. So we'd have to re-authenticate, and hopefully that would make sure that anyone who's got that compromised credential can't access it anymore. But what we don't have is any information about what's happened to this compromised device. So if we go and look into the machines, we can actually click right in here, and this will now launch Defender ATP. So it's all connected, and we can see that Defender ATP actually received the trigger from Microsoft 365, initiating an action to be taken on that user's machine that we know was impacted. On that user's machine, a whole bunch of files was scanned, over 3,000 files. That malware was detected and it was remediated, and it was done within 2 minutes. So the scale of this shows us that automation is critical in dealing with these types of threats. the system was able to automatically identify malicious behavior. It was able to launch an investigation. It stopped the attack before it got too far. It deleted all of those compromised emails. It then reset the user's account, and it fixed the user's PC, all automatically with no human intervention. You know, it's unlikely that any SOC team would have been able to respond to this faster. So, of course, we can look at the log data on Defender ATP if we need to. So, additional protections include things like safe attachments. So this is where you get an email through, and if the attachment is compromised in any way, Microsoft 365, once safe attachments is enabled, can automatically scan that email for you. What it will do is move that email into a secure detonation chamber. It will do all of the checks necessary on that email, make sure that the files contained within it are not malicious in any way, and then allow you to open it if it passes the checks. If it doesn't pass the checks, it won't allow you to open the file. It takes a little bit of time while it's doing that check, approximately 45 seconds to do that, but it's well worth the time to prevent these attacks getting through to your organization. The second thing that we can do is enable safe links. It's similar to safe attachments. What safe links will do is scan for any links that are in your emails, automatically detonate them in a sandbox environment, and if it finds that there's an issue with the link, if it's a phishing attempt or if the link is taking you to a non-secure site or some site where they're trying to get information they shouldn't be, so it's taking you off to a site where that's been compromised, for instance, it will automatically block that for you. And how that will work is it will rewrite those URLs, click on them, it will perform the tests, and if it's malicious, it will block it. There's no chance of your users being impacted. So I won't go through all of these. There's a lot of security policies that should be configured on your tenant if you want to make sure that you are safe and you take advantage of all of those capabilities included within Microsoft 365. Governing Microsoft Teams. So a lot of the things that we've covered are similar. However, with Teams, you have additional challenges, and these can include inconsistent naming of teams, duplication of teams, unintentional sharing of content outside the organization, teams missing owners, non-standard channels and apps, inactive or unused teams causing user confusion, and mistakenly deleting a team, which is surprisingly easy to do. And when you delete a team, it actually deletes the underlying Microsoft 365 group, which then deletes all the resources connected to it, including the SharePoint site connected to that team. So you lose, potentially could lose, all of your documentation and data that's stored on SharePoint as well. So BlueSource has several tool sets and options that we can help with Teams governance. We can help you with controlling the sprawl of teams, with controlling the creation process. So you have consistent naming of your teams. You can templatize your teams so the user experience is consistent for your end users. And you can manage all of those challenges that I've just listed with Teams. How do we do it? Well, we can do it using a few different technologies. So we can do it using pure Microsoft stack, so using Power Apps, Power Automate, and Azure Automation to create the team. We can also do it using Nintex. So Nintex Forms, Nintex Workflows, connecting to Teams, and doing all of the workflows and the templating for you. All right.
Karthik, thank you. Really interesting coverage of some issues, the services we provide, and that I think that demo of Compliance Center, shows to me a really powerful tool set. I think it links to my comment about IT and the need to bring the compliance and security teams along for the journey. I'm conscious this time last year, for those interested, we were actually in the desert in 45-degree heat, waiting outside some of the arenas to get in to see Microsoft Inspire. So Karthik, you've taken some of that pain out of it for us. You've done the late nights last week, and it'd be good to get your highlights. I am conscious of time, so we may respond individually to the questions being brought up. I don't think we're going to have time for that at the end. So Karthik, I think on the announcements from Inspire, I think we may just need quicker through it and to get to a summary and where people can respond if they do need any greater detail from Inspire. But yeah, what's the highlights for you?
Absolutely. So I'll start with Teams. So obviously Teams is a big thrust area for Microsoft. I mean, the growth has been tremendous. You know, it's shot up to, I believe the latest stats was something like 75 million concurrent users on Teams. So crazy numbers. But yeah, so Teams is a big area. So a lot of the initial announcements were around Teams. So first of all, there's now a Power BI app for Teams, so it brings that whole Power BI experience right within within Teams. Also, a lot of things around Power Platform. So you can now build apps and chatbots and visualize your data without leaving Teams. So you can actually build your applications right within Teams and then publish them to Teams. Similarly, Power Virtual Agents. So this is a new way to build chatbots. Again, doing it within Teams, but it's all, as you can see from the screenshot, it's all visual, very easy for citizen developers, as Microsoft calls them. So basically, your business users to build out their own chatbots to help with processes within their departments. We've got Microsoft DataFlex, which is a new, basically a new relational database model. Again, the benefits are that it can be spun up and accessed right within Teams, so you don't need to connect to external data sources and do all of the configuration to connect to an external data source. So you can just start typing, define your data source within Teams, and use that for your applications. Managing Teams room devices. You can now do that from directly within the Teams admin center. This was always a bit of a pain before, but now it's been extremely simplified. Microsoft Lists Home. So this is the new lists capability that's been introduced into SharePoint. So this is now available natively within Teams through the Lists Home app. Teams walkie-talkie. This is a new feature, might be relevant in some organizations. So you can predefine sort of push-to-talk contacts, so making it very easy, especially for workers who are in the front line, just being able to very quickly initiate conversations with others through Teams. Insider risk management. So insider risk management is all about managing employee risks, and a new communication compliance component has now been added to it. So in this case, you can look at, or the system will automatically try and track and target and identify where there's been potential harassment against other employees, use of profanity, use of threats within the organization, etc. So it'll flag those, pass those on to your HR teams or compliance teams. And then this, I think, is a really big one. So Microsoft has heard the feedback from users, especially now with everyone working remotely, working from home. So an extension of the DLP protections to endpoints has started to roll out. So it started with Windows devices. So you can now extend, so all of those things that we saw with defining your DLP policies in the Compliance Center, you can now extend those to the endpoint. So this means if somebody downloads a file, for instance, out of SharePoint or out of Teams to their local desktop, you can now do things to control that. So you can, this also extends to not just the Windows desktop, but also to the Edge browser. It's completely, doesn't require any agents or anything to run. So it's fully native on the desktop as well as the browser, no plugins or no agents. So what you can do is if somebody downloads a file and then they try and upload it, put it onto a USB drive, for instance, you can block it. If they try and upload it onto another SaaS solution, for instance, through the browser, you can block it. So this is really, really amazing. This has just gone into preview. Hopefully, it will be released to GA once they've done some more testing on it. But I think this will be very, very powerful. And you can see a screenshot there of how it stops it right within your desktop. Double key encryption, I think another very powerful feature. This is for organizations that are very concerned about their security, especially if they're in certain geographic locations where the countries might force Microsoft to hand over data, etc. In this case, using double key encryption means you hold one set of keys, Microsoft has the other one. So any double key encrypted data, well, nobody can get at it unless you authorize it. And then the final thing is Return to Workplace app. As businesses starting to open up, Microsoft has built this Power App. It's free for anyone to use and fully customizable. So you can just download it and you can then put in things like, which of your office locations are opening, what services those locations might be starting to roll out in a phased manner, for instance. Doing things like issuing day passes for employees to go in, so you can control the number of employees actually going back to the office, and again do things in a phased manner. So fully customizable, download it and use it if you need to. So those are the key announcements in the kind of modern workplace area that were announced at Ignite.
Cool. Karthik, thank you. I think we are going to, because of the time, we're going to speed through that. But thank you for your detailed view of how we can help the Microsoft Compliance Center capability and the new features and updates coming out of the Microsoft platform. Just 3 areas, just to summarize. The data governance and visitor engagement. This is your quick start to information governance and the processes built into Office 365, basically giving you the confidence in tool sets. The teams governance and visaging, that's bringing control standards and again, confidence in managing teams. That's your detailed entry point. Both services also document any potential third-party tool sets you may need to complement the particular business requirements outside of the capabilities within Compliance Center. And also our cloud backup service. It's been really interesting, the amount of customers who don't realize that the Microsoft platform is built on shared responsibility. Microsoft are responsible for your application, but you as the customer is responsible for the data. We can help build recovery and protection, like for example, ransomware into your Office 365 roadmap. What we haven't mentioned too much detail is that license management. As you can see with what Karthik's gone through with regards E3 and E5 and all the capabilities, that license management, being able to manage the needs from either entry-level licenses or E3 or E5, and the ability to constantly make sure you have the right users and the right level of licensing to manage costs is key. So talk to us about that as well. And if you need any further information, I think you've got myself and Karthik's email address there. If you don't want to email us, you've got hello, but you'll probably get one of us anyway, I'm sure. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Karthik, for going through that. Stay safe and have a great summer, and we'll speak soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John.